Yeah, so taking security as a centerpiece, will be definitely covering a majority of the best practices in terms of healthcare domain, and mostly talking around that healthcare security itself. So myself, Praveen, I'm founder and CTO of Mind Browser. Of course, working with a lot of startups in last 10 plus years, majority in the healthcare domain, and specifically in the US region. So HIPAA and other compliances which are important. So that is where like I'm more uh, experienced in. I do have Kiran, who is solution architect, and also he has worked on a lot of healthcare projects by himself in his more than 18 years of career. Kiran, why don't you quickly tell more about your background and your experience in healthcare? You're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Praveen. Hi, my name is Kiran. I have around 18 plus years of experience, and in mainly in architectures I have worked on, and in healthcare. So I worked for almost for 5 to 6 years of experience. So I designed many solutions for healthcare and life sciences industries. So mainly the thing is, I was part of the some kind of security center of excellence. So where I played the role in providing HIPAA compliance related solutions and assessment automations. So as part of my solution architecture scheme. Yeah. So thanks, Praveen.
Yeah. Thank you, Kiran. Yeah. Welcome to the webinar. Thanks for taking time today.
Yeah. Thank you, Praveen.
Great. So this is kind of a loose agenda for today's webinar. So we'll be telling more on the cloud strategies one has to follow. Then DevSecOps plays an important role when it comes to the healthcare domain. We'll be talking more on that, how we can like make sure that the security will be implemented as a part of CI/CD pipelines itself. That is also will be covered. Then we'll be talking more on the different tools and the platforms that can be used for the compliance assessment. So this is more like HIPAA compliance. Of course, these there are some. These are the kind of common tools in other compliance needs as well, but most widely used in the healthcare. Of course, like we'll speak more on HIPAA in healthcare. Then security measures that one need to take care when they're building any kind of a healthcare product. Then also we'll touch base on architecture for security and the compliance needs one has to do if you're starting your product journey, healthcare product journey, then what kind of architecture one should go for. This is again not cloud specific. Of course, we have some slides which are related to AWS cloud, which is also a major player when it comes to healthcare, and they provide a lot of HIPAA compliance services, which themselves take care of the lot of headaches that one needs to follow, like in terms of encryption, backups, and whatnot. Then there are different stages when it comes to data security that we'll also briefly go through. We'll be going through. Then also Kiran will tell more on the tokenization. It's related to data security and the different use cases that one has to follow. And of course, we'll touch base more on automation in the security so that how one can do the automation and make sure that the more productivity can be achieved, right? So without manual intervention. So we'll start with the first like cloud strategies. Yeah, Kiran, over to you. Maybe why don't you take this ahead and discuss more on the different strategies one follows.
Yeah, yes, Praveen. Thanks, Praveen. So yeah, I mean, generally when we come now days for the agility and high operation efficiency, so many projects are inclined towards to cloud. And mainly the thing is as part of the business requirements, like mainly in terms of cost efficiency, next high productivity and agility. So these will be the part of some key features, some KPIs that are part of the business requirements. And this will be served effectively by a cloud model. And this cloud model is surrounded by like kind of high scalability and availability services, high operation efficiency. So that will reduce the on-prem or infra management setup for the project team, and even the effective monitoring, like kind of alerts and notifications, and automation and DevOps, and multi-tenancy, so especially, so which is for mostly for SaaS-based architectures and even multi-tenant-based applications. So all this part of cloud model. And now finally, so which is the topic of this webinar, which is for security. So that is the one where we are going to focus on that. So how we can use the cloud strategies to effectively achieve security, especially in healthcare projects. And also we can achieve the best compliance, mainly adhering to all the HIPAA compliance checks and automating those reports so that the team can take alertive actions in order to mitigate that from a severe risk. So these are the strategies that we are going to see, and the focus is on security and governance.
Great.
Yes,
Thanks, Kiran.
Yeah. One question arises like to everyone that so this webinar intention is mainly for a security part, like mainly we are studying security. But what are the possible security attacks that might be that might occur in healthcare? So especially in healthcare projects, like for example, when we take an application, either at web application or a mobile app or the web services or even the database, or we have any data projects. So all these, the possible attacks, the generic possible attacks. So mainly we'll have like kind of DOS attacks. So that is one of the very thing where in DOS attacks, what they do is actually they inject a lot of traffic, which is like malicious traffic to the servers and make the servers to stop, so that it will not serve the healthy or the organic traffic, but it will. So because of the inorganic traffic, so that is coming, though there is a possibility of the server shutdown, and this possibly lead to an attack. Similarly, ransomware attacks are also one of the possible thing, and recently that has been seen in many cyber security areas also. Like for example, this is actually injecting some scripts, malicious scripts, and they are corrupting the sensitive data, and for that, and they are encrypting the data so that the application users cannot use the data. And for that, actually, in order to bring the data to normal state, the hackers are charging the amount, which is called some kind of ransom pay amount like that. So that is one of the attacks which is being seen recently in many areas. And even data breaches, especially for healthcare, we have like kind of sensitive information, sensitive to like patient's health information. And these are all the main sensitive informations. So there is a possibility of, if this data is not protected, so there is a possibility of breach. So where this data should not be exposed, and that might lead to different privacy violations. And phishing is one of the very boldest attack, just like DOS attack, like kind of an email intriguing. So kind of a malicious links that are injected in the emails, and so click on that links of that email might inject the script and capture the user session from the whatever the application he has logged in. And similarly, broken authentication and broken authorization. Like for example, it is like if the passwords are not strong enough, and even the access roles are not being defined properly, so there might be possibility to attack. Just like if we see like a kind of a rainbow attack earlier we used to have, like where they store the defined passwords and they use permutations and combinations to capture these user IDs as passwords, and they do these attacks. Similarly, SQL injections we see mostly in our projects, like kind of the projects, the applications are running SQL queries. So they inject, they actually malform the SQL query, and they will be able to get the data from the database through this malformed SQL query. Similarly, cross-site scripting is also one of the very oldest one, like kind of injecting the script in the user, in the browser loaded script. Like for example, a malicious script is injected into the application JavaScript, and that might actually invoke the user's URL, the application URL through the user session capture. So these are the different possibility security attacks that might occur in healthcare. And now there is a necessity to prevent all these type of attacks, and our application should be very strong enough to protect from all these attacks.
Correct.
Yeah,
right.
yes, yeah. So as part of that, so first and the foremost is where we can implement these security measures. So this is where there are mainly two places. I mean, we can say 2 or 3 places because the data will be associated with both infrastructure and application. So mainly at infra level and application. And when we come to this application and the infra level, the most automated thing we achieve in the agile world is DevOps. And for that, we need to implement DevSecOps. So where the security has to be integrated strictly with the DevOps things. And we had some use cases recently, like where we implemented for a few healthcare companies, like where the healthcare companies has to do frequent security assessment risks both at the infra level and also at the application level. So mainly when we do infrastructure as a code while provisioning the infrastructure. So during that time we follow the security policies where we run the policies as the code. And similarly, we also, once the infrastructure is provisioned, we run frequently the infra compliance risk assessment things. And then for that, we use some tools. So where the tools we'll be studying in the next slide, next coming slides. And similarly, once the infrastructure is provisioned, then during the build, so for example, this build will happen for the application related. So the application also has to be securely, thoroughly assessed. So during that scenario, so whenever the build happens and when the code is deployed to test server or stage server, so our dev server, so there will be some kind of tools, I mean processes, security processes, like static code security testing, similarly dynamic application security testing, which is called DAST and SAST. So SAST is so it will identify any vulnerabilities in the code, or even there is one more for complaints like SBOM and SCA, like composite analysis, software composite analysis. So that will determine any kind of libraries which are deprecated and that cause some security attacks. And similarly, DAST is one which is when the application is being executed or when in the runtime environment. So any kind of attacks are possible. So all these type of checks will be happened at DAST and SAST level and SCA level. So all this will be integrating with our DevOps pipelines. So in order not to miss any of these assessment tools, if you do manually this, there is a possibility of missing. So that is the reason in recent for our healthcare projects. So we have integrated this as a part of our automated pipeline only, so that there will not be missing any of the security phases, so that we adopt actually. So otherwise in manual process, definitely there will be we might miss SAST and we might implement DAST, or we might miss both SAST, DAST and SCA. So, but if you implement this as a phases in every step of CI/CD pipeline that we do, so we'll not miss anything. And then once the application is being deployed to containerization or a non-containerization, even at the infra level, we do the security checks. Like for example, if application is being deployed in EC2 instance, so at EC2 level, we do right from the OS level checks and any vulnerabilities are there. Similar to the container, when it is deployed as a Docker containers, we do the container level security during that time. In addition to that, we also do kind of container image validations, Docker file validations, which we are going to see in the next slides. But this is what we have developed this as a kind of a framework, and we reuse the same framework for different projects in our healthcare domain. So this framework will act like a service. So when we say service, this is a kind of a module. So where we can use or right from infrastructure as a code provisioning to CI/CD integration and reporting the assessments and security risks. So all this will be part of as one bundle that can be expressed service. And everything, the configurations that we do required for a project specific, that we externalize the configurations, so that tomorrow when we want to integrate for other project or other customer, so we just change that in the configurations so that we don't need to change in the framework or anything. So that will start from starting to ending, and it will generate all the reports for us. And even this is integrated with some alerting and notifications immediately. Any security violation, immediately that will be triggered to the team so that they will take care of the corrective actions.
Right.
So that is what.
Yeah. So yeah, just to like comprehend, basically we call it DevOps accelerators internally. These accelerators help any product company and any company to easily onboard or maybe easily plug and play this kind of a service within their infra. Of course, some project level or application level configuration might need based on how exactly the application is built, what kind of a, architecture it is, whether they are using containers or not. So whatever like service we have, it is kind of easily can be added in Jenkins pipeline or any other CI/CD tool that the product customers are using. But yeah, the end result is reports of different reports which can be visualized in Kibana or any visualization platform easily because these reports are having a standard output format like JSON or CSV, and one can easily read and actually figure out the issue.
Yeah.
So moving to next slide, which is more on like how exactly at CI/CD level we have different frameworks or different tools we use to this security audit and security scan. So this happens mostly on every build that we do on different environments. Some of the scans we do like infra level scans we do only on a stage and prod, but others majority of scans we do on the all the three or four environments which are relevant. Any quick thoughts, Kiran, here? You want to add anything?
Yes, Praveen. So, for example, yeah, as you mentioned rightly, that this is being done at different phases, like so deployment. I mean, when before deploying to dev or test. So what we do is once that pipeline gets triggered, then it will execute SC and SBOM, which I was telling you, like composite analysis that detects the library, deprecated libraries or old libraries, and generate a report. And similarly, SAST is also, which I was telling you, and which is part of the static code security testing. And then we also do kind of it, for example, this is containerization based approach. This is one where we do Docker file scan. And then once Docker file is built and it creates an image, we also do a container image scan. And also then we also do the signing of the container, because why we do the signature means so that if an attacker also in between introduce some malicious malicious kind of container image, so there is a possibility of so that malicious container image can run in place of our actual real container image as a container. So container signing will prevent that, will validate that. I mean, it will identify the trust of that, because signature is a kind of a digital signature that in the kind of a security world. So container signing will help in such a way to trust the actual container image. And similarly, we also do the kind of scanning at the manifest file scannings, like deployment manifest file scannings, and whether it is following the best practices. For example, we should not use a kind of base images always. Actually, it should be like kind of the latest images, everything. So all that part of the Docker file scan and manifest file scans, we all do that. And once we deploy that to the runtime environment in the compute layer, so then DAST, IAST, and CAS and infra scans are being executed thoroughly. And any violation in this, any failure in these or anything, we immediately have a integration to this report tracking tool that will actually generate the reports. And through the reports, we constantly monitor any violation checks and all that.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, thanks. So moving to next slide, it's more about different tools. Of course, these are industry widely used tools because and well tested, well community support. Majority of these are like kind of open source and very well known tools. Like for example, the Zero Trust Security New Vector, right? So it's a pretty popular tool used in enterprises for different reasons, security reasons, the compliances. Same with like UAF tools that we use. And of course, for mobile security framework also is one of the popular tools which is used for mobile application security. Yes, Kiran, you want to add something on the other tools like the Rancher, Prowler?
Yes, Praveen. So for example, Prowler is like, it's a open source tool for InfraScan. So mainly it was designed initially for AWS, and now there is a support for other clouds also. Like it will do the assessment of AWS security best practices, auditing. Similarly, it follows guidelines of all the CIS, Amazon Web Services Foundation's benchmark. And also it will include additional checks for including GDPR and HIPAA compliance checks. And there are tools like SCA tools where like OWS AP, dependency track, and that will actually detect all the vulnerabilities scan to check, which is for SCA tool. Even dependency check is also there. And similarly for SaaS tools, there is actually code grip that is in inbuilt house tool for Mind Browser that is being done for static code analysis. And in addition to that, even general tools like SonarQube, which is being used widely across other projects, that is one thing. And similarly, Dash tools was also there, like kind of whatever is JAP, we are doing that, which is actually open source. And similarly, as Praveen was mentioning, like I think NeoVector is mainly for that security platform for complete container security. And for image signing, there is a tool called CoSign that does for signing and verifying. And similarly, image scan is done by Grip, and also NeoVector can also be leveraged for this. And manifest file scans that is being done by TerraScan. And KubeLinter is also there, so we can also use TerraScan for that. Yeah. So these are some tools that being used.
Yeah. Let's take one question from Daniel. So the question is, how do you ensure compliance with regulations such as HIPAA when using cloud services for healthcare data? We actually touched base this in the past webinar, but why don't you, Kiran, put some more light on this today?
Yeah. So yeah, sure. So mainly the thing is, we already have some kind of predefined checks. So for example, the system or the application or the infra or the data. So in order not to get violated from the compliance breaches, so it has to follow some guidelines, especially for healthcare industry, HIPAA compliance things. So the checklist already it is being defined initially as part of our framework that all these has to be followed and regulated. So to ensure all these checklist has to be followed, so we follow that right from our application security, then infra security and data security at the cloud level. For example, in cloud level security, so we ensure that having proper role-based access controls at IAM level and at AD level, and similarly, so a kind of firewall securities, especially for setting up some kind of web application firewalls at both layer 7 and layer 4 level protocols. And similarly, the kind of compute layer that is being not accessed, exposed outside external access. Similarly, the data layer also not being exposed outside data layer access. So these are the kind of things that we follow at infra level. And similarly at application level also, we follow kind of token-based authentications using some OAuth strong protocols. Similarly, tokenization, sensitive data protection, log masking, so data encryptions and all that. And even at the database level also, so we follow a kind of, in order to prevent rainbow attacks, especially we use some strong password mechanisms if the application is stored in database, if the application is controlled through DB user logged in passwords using salt values. And similarly, at the data level also, we don't expose the database access or data warehouse also. That is not being connected directly from external access. So it is being protected only from the resources that are accessible from the VPC level and all that. So all these measures we follow. And we also follow end-to-end data encryption and transport level encryption, right from client to server, whenever a request is being issued from HTTP to HTTPS. So in case if there are any violations in these things also, we ensure the proper security checks. And frequently we monitor that and we adapt and regulate that in our practice.
Right, right. And majority of these cloud providers today, like provide as a business associate agreement, right? So they do have many HIPAA compliant services. So just kind of
Correct.
out of box, right? For example, KMS, which is widely used, and that like we can easily connect with like database storage or any other easy to compute storage also, right? So it is like
Correct.
out of box solution. We don't need to do a lot of heavy lifting there. So easily we can plug and play, right? So and this is kind of a HIPAA compliant itself. So a lot of work time can be saved on that side of things,
Yes, correct. Yes, correct.
right? So specifically speaking about the healthcare security, right? Again, like the HIPAA compliance. So these are like specific. I think I would say like the services one need to make sure that at specific level one has to follow. I was talking about the key management service, the KMS, right? So it's mostly like every cloud provider has this nowadays, and easily you can plug and play. So maybe Kiran, let's go through this quickly, the list
Yes.
so that yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, these are the measures which I was explaining in the last, the earlier session, earlier conversation. Like this TLS and data level security, where we follow like encryptions, masking, hashing. Similarly, we leverage even cloud-related key management systems. As Praveen was rightly mentioning that, so every cloud now there is an agreement that they need to, So though cloud vendors, though cloud providers, even the cloud providers, they will be in mutual consent with the application owners and the vendors who are using the cloud. And it is between the agreement between the cloud provider and the cloud vendor, like the kind of agreement that has to be happen and setting up that. But from the application perspective, from the architecture perspective, so we need to follow all these steps in order to make our application and data HIPAA compliance, like transport and data level security, access controls for authentication authorizations and role-based access controls. So network security for firewalls, like as I was telling, like setting up a web application firewalls. If you take in AWS world, we have like both at layer 4 and layer 7 at shield and WAF level. Similarly, security groups. Similarly, this will be applicable for even Google Cloud like Armor and even Azure WAF. Security groups like only restricting the instead of using or allowing all the traffic, so restricting that with security groups and VPN connectivities. And similarly, audit controls that we frequently do audit checks at application and infra level audits. And even when we do logging and monitoring, the data should be masked, especially for the sensitive data. That cannot be sensitive data cannot be masked without masking. If we log it, it is actually a violation. Similarly, system activity logs, and there is a service level agreement, and backups are most important, data backups. If you lose the data, then definitely that is a part of both business loss and compliance issues. Similarly, DR mechanisms, even if the primary region fails, how the secondary region can take up that. These are all the different things that we manage both at the application, data, and infra level.
yeah, great, thanks, Kiran. So
Yeah.
these are the
So
some measures, right? So yeah, please let's go. Sorry.
yeah, yes, friend. So this is where we do at the like kind of an application security, like we use a kind of, so instead of using the password things, password-based authentication mechanisms, we use an OAuth-based things with short-lived tokens. And if in case if you're using password-based authentications, it will be like kind of a hashing the passwords along with the salt values. Similarly, the PI data and sensitive data like data masking, encryptions, and tokenization. So tokenization is recently so we have implemented that as a use case, and similarly interceptors logging listeners. So we followed that in recent projects, like for example, the user interface login based mechanism is through OAuth, and where we had a OAuth provider like Cognito, and that validates the credentials and generates a token. And similarly, we integrated for one of the project like Auth0 also. So these are some OAuth providers, and so that will generate a token, and we are setting the token very short-lived token. So even the token duration should not be uh, should not be long, because actually there is a possibility of attacking the token and intruder can use that token. Similarly, we also recently used in kind of logging tools like in ELK and Datadog. So there is a masking of the data, so where the data should not be exposed, especially for the PI data. And encryptions are also very important, where the data should be encrypted. And for every audit mechanisms, interceptors are most important, so that we'll have a log of who has logged in and at what time they have logged in, and what are, in case if any attacks are happening, that at the interceptor levels, we can see that. Yeah. And code level security, like will avoid the hard coding of the sensitive data, avoiding storage of secrets running at client-side scripts. Okay, and we'll use method and domain object security levels. And similarly avoid logging of plain text in client-side scripts.
Yeah, this is most commonly found in majority of the people. Like if people, like as a ops person, like if you don't have control on the devs, what devs are doing, then it can be a kind of a challenge in long run.
Yeah. Yes,
so I was talking about this business partner agreement. This is more on like we're talking to AWS. And more or less like these are the similar services other cloud providers do also support. So let's quickly, I think we can quickly go through telling more on, maybe I'll just quickly walk you guys through, like, for example, in data at rest and transit, right? So the KMS is one of the services which can be used for encryption, S3 for as a storage, right? Where data can be stored. And this is tightly connected with the KMS so that the encryption is taken care by AWS itself. As a developer or engineer, you don't need to do anything as such. RDS is again like a database service, relational database service they provide. Certificate manager, which is more like generating the SSL certificate. And a good part is that we don't need to manage those, and it will be auto renewed by AWS itself. EC2 is again a complete cloud, where actually it is connected over the to the network through maybe like load balance and targets group. Or they, again, like we can have tight security between the EC2 where the actual application is running and the load balancer through SSL or self-signed certificates as well. Then for the policies which Kiran was talking about, like roles and authentication authorization in terms of roles, the strict roles, like IAM is one of the best way to make sure that the boundaries are correctly defined when it comes to the access management. And again, like OAuth2 and the Cognito, these are the, again, like Cognito is one of the very widely used service from the AWS. Again, this is another HIPAA compliant service they provide. And as far as security at network level is concerned, the private subnets are there, virtual private cloud, again, like the VPC network we can create. Again, there is a concept of VPC endpoint, again, that is can be used for securing the stuff. And also there are security groups to make sure that the firewall is, and only the ports that are needed are open, right? So the security group is one of the widely used things in all the way, like whether it's EC2 or the load balancer and whatnot. Then, as Kiran was mentioning, the logs, audit logs, CloudTrail and CloudWatch, these are like very widely used from the Amazon. And OpenSearch is another like similar service, which is again like many of the enterprises using. As far as backup, again, the AWS adopts some solutions like Glacier for the archival of the data, so that the cost, if you have a large set of data, but we need for the compliance reason, then you can have a Glacier as a service where cost can be saved in, like, you can see a tremendous decrease in the cost if you want to retain a data, for example, government data, right? So government has to store some of the files for 10 years or 20 years for the compliance reasons. But those, if you store as a normal way on S3, but then it will going to cost a lot. But if you use a Glacier, which can archive a data, but of course, when you want to retrieve it again, it may take some time to like kind of take out of Glacier cloud. But again, based on need and for the compliance reasons, the Glacier is widely used. Same goes with the like EBS snapshots, which is again kind of used for the backup. And Route 53 is mostly like kind of a routing service, which is widely used from the Amazon. Yeah, so maybe quickly, Kiran, let's go through this. We have a few more minutes today.
Yeah. So in addition to the application and the infra level security, even the data security at the granular level is also most important. Like, for example, these are the different data security phases where we will be having, for example, data access control mechanisms. So we have an authentication and access control like SSO-based authentication, role-based access control. Similarly, backups and recovery, like data theft through data stealing can be achieved through backup and recovery. Similarly, encryption and masking. So data encryption and masking is most important. Similarly, protecting sensitive data with random characters that are not algorithmically reversible. So there is a concept of tokenization, and which is being widely used, especially in the data security area. And this is maintained by, we can implement this solution by maintaining the centralized tokenization server that can get the tokenized input and validate that the input is valid or not. So this actually, 1 year back, so we have done this kind of tokenization framework where we have done for a use case, which we can show you in the coming slides, how we can protect this sensitive data, so that where algorithmically it cannot be reversible. So, for example, we have an application that processes sensitive data. So what we have is we have kind of a vault tokenization server. So that is a part of that can be integrated with the vault. And so when we pass the sensitive data, first it will check for an authentication, whether this request is coming from proper user or not. And if the authentication is success, then it will generate it will convert this sensitive data to a token. And the token is a kind of, which we cannot even, if we try actually even multiple algorithms also, we cannot reverse the data. So with this, we can actually, this will return the token, and tokenization replaces sensitive data with non-sensitive information. And there are different tokenization third-party libraries, even at Apache open source level and some third-party at enterprise level. So where we can leverage this kind of thing, and especially MD5 and Bcrypt, they're also supporting these tokenization things. Similarly, the reverse also fine. So this is like sensitive data to a token. Now a token can be converted to sensitive data. So that is where that will be possible only with the de-tokenization server access. So in that way, we developed a framework for this, which is very, where we adapted that in some of the projects. And so this is a kind of like where network segmentation, like out of scope networks, users, process, system must not have access to authentication credentials. So that can be used to authenticate the tokenization system. Similarly, only authenticated users only will be allowed, like it will follow identification, authentication, and authorization mechanisms. And monitoring also, all access to tokenization system should be tracked actually, where an audit level check should happen. So the tokenization should be able to distinguish between the original data and the actual data. So there are some rules fed here which can distinguish, and the process should be compliant like HIPAA, PCI DCS, and high-tech and ITR, all the compliance checks it has to follow. Yeah, so these are the use cases for payment information, for banking, for financial applications, healthcare sensitive data, digital wallets, GDPR, HIPAA, and other compliance data. So these are the use cases, and even blockchain network also, this is being used. Yeah, so this is a part of security framework where we developed last year for infrastructure automation, integrate security policies code, remediation mitigation, automate security monitoring, deployment automation, and we integrate this framework in DevSecOps pipeline, as I was mentioning in the earlier slides, where we can achieve this complete automation as a framework, or framework as automation in the reverse way. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, coming back to the key takeaways from the today's webinar. So these are the 5 important takeaways for anyone who want to again start their journey with the more on the healthcare side and the HIPAA compliance side. So first of one of the biggest takeaways, you found that what are the different strategies, right, to achieve the operational efficiency, productivity, cost effective, and security solution with the cloud model. So we have shown like the different cloud services which is used, and also like there are different ways to save the cost as well. Of course, that's covered uh, in earlier webinar. We shown about like different strategies for the cost saving. And the second one of takeaway was like the different tools we have shown, right? The more on open source side of things. Even the one of the tool we shown about the Prowler, which is open source, as well as their pro version is paid, but which is a kind of a great tool for the infra scanning. And we also covered like static application security scanning, DAST, which is dynamic application, the container security, container signing, co-sign, and whatnot. So these are the different tools which is more widely used in the healthcare. Then Kiran has like briefly told about the tokenization flow and the data security, the importance of it in when it comes to the patient information, or the PHI data, as well as the other sensitive data in the healthcare systems, the logging, the masking, right? So and of course the tokenization in terms of making sure that the sensitive data is tokenized, along with the timeouts and stuff, right? So then timeout in the sense the expiration. Then when it comes to the security framework approach, the end-to-end pipelines, which is we covered in a DevSecOps pipeline flow. It's monitoring, different tools for monitoring. Then the plan for the risk mitigations, right, in terms of alerting, proactive alerting, then backups and restores, right? So also like one of the tool I told earlier is New Vector, which is kind of a runtime container monitoring tool, which is very good when it comes to the runtime scanning from the runtime attacks as well. And then the last takeaway is different security measures, right, in terms of the HIPAA compliant, the network data infrastructure, cloud security model that Kiran was telling earlier. So these are the different takeaways from today's session. I think we should take one question here. There are multiple questions here. So Kiran, like how we should ensure that the security checks are regulated and monitored whenever we release the code to prod environment? I think we should cover this here. Maybe why don't you quickly
yes.
speak more about
yes,
it?
Praveen. So yeah, so this is as I was telling like initially, like security checks are part of automation, so there will not be any kind of manual, because when we follow the manual process, there is a chance of missing the security checklist. So as part of the DevSecOps pipelines, all these security checks has to be executed. And once the code has been released to production, so we'll have a frequent agents, even at the application level also, where we do, we automate the scripts like kind of we'll schedule that periodically that executes the tests, which are mostly for example, idempotent things. Like for example, even if we invoke the APIs, at the production level, it will be only the GET request, will not generally go for the POST request because that might actually update the data. So we do the dashed scanning, so especially for the read-only request. And similarly, when the service is running in the compute environment and when it is being accessed the data, we also use these tools like Prowler and all to do the infra-level security checks. Similarly, container level security checks using NeoVector in the infra level and also at the data level where the database is running. So, and also we also ensure this audit checks and the VPC flow logs also be monitored frequently, so that any of the violations of the cloud trails or the VPC flow logs, we trigger by notifications. And that will actually immediately help us to take the mitigation plans on that.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Kiran.